CGS, ladies and gentlemen, 10 minutes, 12 slides, hang in there, then it's Q&A. What I've been asked to do is look at the role of the ARRC, set it in the context of NATO, but also how does the ARRC then fit in with expeditionary warfare, and particularly the Joint Expeditionary Force. And then I'm going to draw the attention really to the VJTF, the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force, this new initiative. Also, the CGS mentioned about the importance of the divisional level of command, and I do agree. But also I say to the British officers, don't forget about your core, which is the ARRC, as the High Readiness Operational Level Headquarters, which is now under command of the Army. So we're yours. Now also, my aim is to make sure that the ARRC is a headquarters of choice for the next operation. But there is competition out there. If you look on the slide there, within the NATO force structure, you've got 7 high readiness headquarters. The ARRC was the first in 1992 and was there for 10 years in primacy. But quite rightly, other nations offered up their headquarters to the NATO force structure for future operations. And also now with Greece and Poland striving hard for this year or early next to come into that high readiness zone. And as we heard earlier from the German commander, that actually M&C Northeast will now also particularly looking in the Baltic states, B3 Poland, in that area there. But therefore, if the NATO force structure looks towards the NATO command structure, and you'll know about SHAPE and General Breedlove as SACEUR, and for us with the UK, our DSACEUR, General Adrian Bradshaw. But out SACT, as in the Supreme Allied Command Transformation, the big training wing out in Virginia, but particularly for us, which is concerned, are the 2 joint forces in Brunssum and in Naples, supported by AirCom, MARCOM, and the latest is LANDCOM up in Izmir, in Turkey. That's who we work through on the NATO chain of command. Now, our role, it could be within NATO, European Union, Coalition of the Willing, national business, but not only that, we might be asked to be a core headquarters, land component headquarters, as well as a joint task force headquarters. Quite an ask to be that versatile and that agile. But we have to be because we just can't predict where the next operation is coming from. And therefore, we're on standby as a JTF headquarters from Thursday on for the next 12 months. But you might ask, why are we a JTF headquarters? Well, the reason for this is that if you look at the NATO's level of ambition, it's 2 major joint operations and 6 small joint operations. And as you see from Brunssum and Naples, they couldn't cover that plethora of ops. So they've asked the HRFLs if now step up to the plate and be able to do a joint task force for a small joint operation, which is about divisional size, 350 sorties, about a naval task force, and a number of special force task groups. And that is what's asked of us. Quite understandably, we're not purple, we're not truly joint. We can't be, because the next operation could be as a land component. But we've got the expertise within the headquarters to understand joint action and joint effect. So we're the plug, or the socket, in which the expertise will come in as and when required. But also, it isn't just the joint aspects, as we've seen from Iraq and Afghanistan. More importantly, it's the combined joint interagency, intergovernmental, and multinational. And it's something we try on all our exercises to make sure we get out of our comfort zone and stretch our minds out of the military domain so we understand our part in the overall operation. And therefore, why I think it's possible to be all of those of a core, land component, and JTF is because we've done it. If you see there in Bosnia as a core, Kosovo as a land component, Afghanistan in 2006 as a theatre joint task force, and then helping the IJC with a slug of the ARRC in 2011. And if not, we're normally on standby. So we have a record. But to do that, what our main theme and probably our strength is our multinationality. 60% is UK, 40% is our other nations. So we're one of the most multinational of the high readiness headquarters. Within the other 16 nations of different strengths, but it's like a 16 or 17 braided rope that once you've actually got it together and can understand the weaknesses and strengths of what you've got before you, and that multinational is here to stay, I think it does make a strong bond and a strong headquarters. We're possibly going up to 21 with join of Croatia, Poland, New Zealand, and Sweden later this year. But it's not about the flag count, it's the capability that those officers bring and their experiences and the prism of which they look through, I think is the most important part. So if we've got the flags, what's in the structure? And this is really important because, as you've seen from our mission, we might be a JTF headquarters one year, but then we might be looking forward to be a land component the next. So you can see in the red there, those are the staff officers who are here on our peace detachment ready for operations. So 18 in the air, 6 maritime, 3 special forces, 25 civilian. And they will remain with us, whatever our cycle. Because we've learned in this last year, as we got evaluated as a JTF headquarters, how our awareness of the other environments is so much better now by having those staff officers, and probably self-explanatory, inculcated into our headquarters. We start breathing jointery. And therefore, that's why we would ask that they remain, because we will be a better land component now, having been a JTF quarters, because we understand a little bit more about air, maritime, special forces, and the civilian component. Now, just noting that if you look at the Joint Expeditionary Force, the force levels and those flags, again, they are represented within the ARRC. Not in great numbers, but it just means that if we were ever used or asked to support the JEF, then again, we've got that awareness and that connection back into capitals. I'm not saying how the JEF will be used, but it could be that it is on its own at the UK national, but perhaps a coalition of the willing, that the UK might put out the JEF forces. Or in the second line down, it could be with the NRF and the new VJTF, and a little bit more about that later. But it might be even with the CJEF. And do you need an enduring force that comes through, or do you need forces that actually bolster with the UK and France and wider? So this isn't just descriptive, it's just some way that you could possibly use the Joint Expeditionary Force. What we've got to out now is exercise it and think through the consequence of that action. Coming with the JEF, though, and it was really in the Wales Summit, where they're looking at our NATO response force that wasn't as versatile, wasn't as agile as it needed to be. And therefore, they wanted a responsive, capable, and credible force based on a brigade, but actually it's within a divisional construct because you're going to have the VJTF brigade, then the IFFG, the initial follow-on brigade, and you might then have the 3rd brigade, which is your follow-on group, and all the assets come with it. So it's a brigade, but within the division. Based on, as you've seen there, with that lead fighting brigade at 5 days' notice to move. That is a step change. That is what we've got to train to do. Flexibility on command and control, and there's lots of diagrams out there that say how it might be commanded. All Sakura has said is, don't force me into a corner, don't dictate as to what the command and control is now, let me have that flexibility and choice. But it does obviously make our life a little bit more hard as we try and work out what are the combinations that C2 might be. But also now, we're looking very closely with the German Netherlands Corps, who've been taking the VJTF concept through this year. They've done a LERTEX and a DeployX just recently up into Poland, learning some of the old skills that have atrophied. In the Cold War, we had a huge department in shape that would move a corps across nations. That's gone. So now with ammunition and other sort of natures, it's difficult because customs have the peacetime restrictions that don't let us just flow as we used to across our nations. If you go from Portugal to Poland, it's 10 different airspaces. So who's doing that clearance? It can't be left to the cause. We've now got to actually relearn some of those skills that we had before, if you want that force to be able to move in 5 days and then be in theatre to enact. So I mentioned the German Netherlands have got it this year, NRD Spain, and Spain held it in 16, and then the UK has got the VJTF in 2017. And again, just on that, showing you where, for us as a UK, the VJTF brigade will be made up possibly of 13 nations. So that really will be testing the interoperability with a multinationality in a brigade. And that is something that we want to look and exercise as we come through in this year and next. And that leads me almost on to my last slide, is how do we think the concept is going to work? We don't know in its entirety, but we're going to use exercise Arcade Fusion, which is our big exercise at the end of the year, taking it out into the Baltic states. And great to see the commander of the Lithuanian Land Forces here, because we're going to come in through Lithuania, received in by the Lithuanians through their new NATO Force Integration Unit, to take us through a convoy support center, up into the border into Latvia, do a handover to the Latvian NATO Force Integration Unit, before we go into Riga and then to the Lievada airbase. Our Joint Logistics Support Group will understand how you do move now troops and formations through even though the main exercise is only going to be as a CPX. When we're in Riga and Leeuwarden, we're then trying to work out how do you bring in the VJTF? What about the follow-on forces, so the brigade that will be coming through, which in this case will be 173, of the American brigade, that will actually be in place. So how do you then take command of in-places forces? By working then with a two-star headquarters, which is going to be full ID, as to work out how do you then move follow-on forces that might be coming in over time. But I think critically, when we look at both with Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, with the CHODs, what forces are under command? If they're not under command, how do we work with them, with the reservists, with their own forces, and then you put the VJTF or the IFG on top, work out the battle space management before we even start to fight. And I think that will then stretch and some of the frictions that you might find or not, and experiment to understand how it would work for real using RK Fusion as our vehicle to do so. The scenario, going to use the Skullcan 2 scenario, Bothnia as the threat, but really using it as the hybrid warfare scenario, sub-Article 5, so we're not into the fight, but it's below the radar. What's happening in theatre? What do we have to react against? Taking some examples from what's happened in Georgia, Crimea, Ukraine, and then putting that on the Skullcan 2 scenario to make us think about how you do it when things are below the radar, but you've got to be there to assure, deter, before you actually then have to defend and fight. Next year, and someone else will then take it into the fight, understand, I think we just do one step at a time, and this will hopefully use as a vehicle for others to take it through into 16 before the UK is in on 17. So in summary then, the ARRC as the Army's high readiness headquarters, ideally we want to be one of the best within NATO to make sure that we've got be the headquarters of choice on the next operation, but also making sure we understand multinationality and its interoperability, but not just in a Army land-centric, but on the combined joint interagency, intergovernmental and multinational, and particularly the comprehensive approach. If we ever forget that, that will actually be quicker than we can say go. But also, as we now look to be, and what we think is the VJTF and wider the enhanced NRF, what does that mean? What the credibility is to make sure that it is real and it doesn't just fall away. This is our one chance to make sure that we've got something that is credible and be ready for the next fight. On top of that, though, using the ARRC as an experimental platform, and it's really where General Barron's was from this morning. Unfortunately, we're still on that left-hand side of the column, looking at fusion intelligence. It isn't just black and white, it's the colors of the rainbow, but also looking at some of the big data and how we do our open sources, social media, and cyber. Defensive within NATO, but if others are going to do the offensive on a unilateral line, what else is out there? What should we be thinking? What are the difficult questions we've got to ask, and how do we exercise that? All these things, I think, need to be done if we are going to be credible and ready for the next operation. Thank you very much.